Have you ever felt completely invisible, even when standing in a room filled with 1,000 people? For Natalie Finch, that feeling was a cold, hard reality. She was on the arm of her millionaire tech mogul husband at the biggest event of the year, the Innovators of Tomorrow Gala, draped in designer couture that felt more like a costume than a dress. But as her husband held court basking in the flash of cameras, he treated her like a ghost. What he didn't know, and what no one in that glittering ballroom could have predicted, was that the city's most powerful and reclusive billionaire was watching. And he wasn't looking at the millionaire. He was looking at the wife everyone else chose to ignore. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of resurrection. The air in the back of the chauffeured Maybach was thick with an expensive, suffocating silence. Natalie Finch stared out at the rain-slicked streets of downtown Chicago, the city lights blurring into abstract streaks of neon and gold. Beside her, Gregory Finch wasn't looking at the city. He was staring at his own reflection in the dark screen of his phone, adjusting the knot of his Tom Ford tie. "Did you remember the talking points I sent over?" he asked, his voice clipped, devoid of warmth. Natalie turned from the window. "The ones about DataSphere's Q3 projections and the new AI integration." "Yes, Greg. I read them." "Good," he grunted. "Don't just read them, absorb them. When people talk to you, I need you to sound like you understand the business. It reflects on me." Natalie's fingers tightened around the cool silk of her clutch. It was always about how she reflected on him. For the past 5 years, ever since Gregory's financial analytics company, DataSphere, had exploded from a garage startup into a 9-figure behemoth, her own identity had been systematically erased. She was no longer Natalie Finch, the promising landscape architect, with a degree from Cornell and a passion for sustainable urban design. She was Mrs. Gregory Finch, a beautiful, well-dressed accessory whose primary function was to smile, nod, and parrot his corporate achievements. "Of course," she said, her voice a practiced, placid murmur. "The Innovators of Tomorrow." Gala was the pinnacle of the tech and finance world's social calendar. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Peninsula Chicago, a cavernous space of crystal chandeliers and gilded ceilings. To Gregory, this night was the Super Bowl. It was a chance to network, to intimidate rivals, and to cement his status as the new king of Chicago's tech scene. To Natalie, it was just the fanciest cage she'd be put in all year. As they stepped out of the car, a volley of flashbulbs went off. Gregory immediately straightened, a shark-like smile spreading across his face. He put a hand on the small of Natalie's back, a proprietary gesture that felt more like a brand than a touch. He steered her down the red carpet, posing, smiling, and dropping the names of venture capitalists into the ears of eager journalists. Natalie smiled beside him, a perfect, hollow doll. Inside the room buzzed with the energy of 1,000 egos colliding. Tech titans, hedge fund managers, and venture capitalists swirled around the room, their conversations a cacophony of market caps and leveraged buyouts. Gregory was in his element. He released Natalie's back the moment they were past the main crush of photographers. "Go get us some champagne," he ordered, his eyes already scanning the room, hunting for his next target. "And try to look engaged. Brenda Lowe from TechCrunch is here. I need to make a good impression." Natalie watched him stride away, his back ramrod straight, and felt a familiar wave of cold invisibility wash over her. She was a prop he had finished using for the moment. Taking a deep breath, she navigated the crowded room toward the bar. She felt the weight of hundreds of eyes not seeing her, but seeing the wife of Gregory Finch in a stunning midnight blue Oscar de la Renta gown that he had picked out. As she waited for the bartender, she overheard two men behind her. "That's Finch's wife," one said in a low voice. "Heard she was some kind of gardener or something before he made it big." "A gardener, seriously?" the other scoffed. "Well, he certainly upgraded her scenery. She's just another tech wife now. Pretty quiet, and probably spends a fortune." The words were like tiny, sharp needles against her skin. A gardener. She had designed a multi-award-winning therapeutic garden for a children's hospital. She had published a paper on xeriscaping in urban environments. But in this world, in her husband's world, she was just a gardener. She took the 2 flutes of champagne from the bartender, her hand trembling slightly, and turned to find her husband. He was already deep in conversation, his arm casually draped around the shoulders of a sharp, stylish woman with a predatory smile. Brenda Lowe. Gregory was laughing a loud, performative sound designed to draw attention. Brenda Lowe was hanging on his every word, her expression a perfect blend of admiration and journalistic curiosity. Natalie approached the small circle, the champagne flutes feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. "And so the algorithm we developed is essentially a predictive engine for market volatility. It's revolutionary," Gregory was boasting. "It sounds it," Brenda said, her voice smooth as silk. "I'd love to do a deep dive feature on you for TechCrunch, Gregory." "We can arrange that," Gregory said, finally noticing Natalie's presence. He took a glass from her without a word of thanks, handing it to Brenda. He then took the other for himself, leaving Natalie empty-handed. "Brenda, this is my wife, Natalie." He said the introduction an afterthought. Brenda gave Natalie a fleeting, dismissive glance. "A pleasure." Her focus returned instantly to Gregory. "So about the seed funding for this new AI project." They spoke for 10 minutes. Natalie stood there, a silent satellite in her husband's orbit. She tried to interject once when the conversation touched upon corporate campus design and its effect on productivity. "Actually, biophilic design principles have shown a 15% increase in employee creativity." Natalie began, her voice quiet but clear. "Integrating natural elements into the workspace is more than just aesthetics. It's about—" Gregory cut her off with a sharp, patronizing laugh. "Honey, please, let's leave the gardening tips for the weekend. We're talking about billions of dollars here." He turned back to Brenda, winking conspiratorially. "She loves her plants." The casual cruelty of the remark, spoken so publicly, landed like a physical blow. Brenda Lowe smirked a quick, cutting expression that confirmed Natalie's status as a complete non-entity. The small group around them chuckled politely. In that moment, Natalie felt a heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with a sudden volcanic rage. The room seemed to tilt, the glittering chandeliers blurring into indistinct stars. She murmured an excuse that no one heard, and turned, walking away with as much dignity as she could muster. She didn't have a destination. She just needed to escape the suffocating weight of her husband's world. Her path took her past a grand marble-topped table where several older, more established figures were conversing quietly. One man in particular stood out. He wasn't loud or flashy like the tech crowd. He was in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair, wearing a flawlessly tailored Brioni suit that spoke of old money and quiet confidence. His eyes, a piercing shade of grey, met hers for a fraction of a second. He had been watching her. Not just her, but the entire humiliating exchange with Gregory and Brenda. There was no pity in his gaze, but something else. Recognition. That man was Donovan Kincaid. Even Natalie, insulated as she was, knew the name. Kincaid was a legend. A billionaire investor who had built his empire not on volatile tech stocks, but on tangible, world-altering assets, real estate, sustainable energy infrastructure. He was notoriously private, rarely attending such events. His presence alone was a topic of hushed speculation. She quickly looked away, feeling exposed, and pushed through a set of glass doors onto a deserted terrace overlooking the Chicago skyline. The cool night air was a welcome shock. She leaned against the cold stone balustrade, the city lights a glittering, indifferent tapestry below. The laughter and music from the ballroom seemed a world away. She had never felt so alone, so utterly erased. The Oscar de la Renta gown felt like a lead blanket. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated fury. For the first time in years, she wasn't just sad about her situation. She was done with it. The click of a heavy door opening behind her made Natalie flinch. She half expected it to be Gregory, coming to reprimand her for abandoning her post at his side. She braced herself, turning, slowly. But it wasn't her husband. It was him, Donovan Kincaid. He held 2 glasses of what looked like mineral water, one with a slice of lime. He approached her, not with the predatory confidence of the other men inside, but with a quiet, respectful deference. "I thought you might prefer this to the champagne," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone. He offered her one of the glasses. "It appears your husband commandeered your last drink." His directness was disarming. He wasn't pretending he hadn't seen what happened. Natalie hesitated for a moment before taking the glass. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little hoarse. "It's a beautiful view," he said, turning to look out at the city. "But I've always found the real architecture isn't in the skyscrapers, but in the spaces between them. The parks, the plazas, the parts people actually live in." The comment was so unexpected, so aligned with her own passions, that it took her by surprise. "Most people just look at the height of the buildings," she replied, her voice regaining some of its strength. "Most people are focused on the wrong metrics," Kincaid said, taking a sip of his water. He then turned his full attention to her. His grey eyes were intelligent and searching. "Your husband dismissed your comment about biophilic design. He was wrong to do so. My firm, Kincaid Holdings, just invested $200 million in a development project based entirely on that principle. Our analysts project it will be one of the most profitable ventures we've undertaken in the last decade." Natalie stared at him, stunned into silence. He wasn't just being kind. He was validating her with facts, with figures, with the one thing her husband respected: money. I didn't know," she stammered. "Your husband is a leader in his field." Kincaid continued, his tone analytical rather than judgmental. "But his field is data, intangible. He sees the world in code and algorithms. He doesn't see the soil, the steel, the living, breathing infrastructure that his data is supposed to serve. That's a critical blind spot." He paused, then asked a question no one had asked her in years. "What is it you do, Mrs. Finch?" "Natalie," she corrected him automatically. "My name is Natalie, and I'm a landscape architect. Or, I was." "There is no was," he said gently. "The knowledge doesn't vanish, just the opportunity to apply it. Tell me about a project you were passionate about." And so she did. Standing on that cold Chicago terrace, under the gaze of a man who commanded global markets, Natalie found her voice. She spoke about her thesis project, a plan to revitalize a derelict industrial canal in the city's south side, turning it into a series of interconnected public gardens and water filtration systems. She called it the Viridian Project. She spoke with a passion and eloquence that had been dormant for years. She talked about native planting storm water management and creating community spaces that fostered both ecological health and social connection. Donovan Kincaid listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone. He just listened, his expression intent, occasionally nodding as if he were taking mental notes. When she finished, a little breathless, the silence stretched for a moment. "That all," he said finally, "is not a gardening tip. That is a multi-million-dollar infrastructure plan that would fundamentally change the social and economic fabric of that entire district." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and produced a slim, heavy business card made of dark grey metal. The lettering was simple: Donovan Kincaid, CEO, Kincaid Holdings. There was a phone number and an email address. "My head of urban development, Mr. Peterson, is always looking for viable, forward-thinking proposals," he said, handing her the card. "If you were to write up a formal prospectus for the Viridian project, I would ensure he gives it his full attention." Natalie took the card. It felt impossibly heavy, a tangible piece of a world she thought she had lost forever. It was more than a business card. It was a lifeline. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Kincaid replied. "You've already said it all." He gave her a small, respectful nod. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Natalie Finch." And with that, he turned and walked back into the glittering ballroom, leaving her alone on the terrace with the cool night air, the sprawling city and the weight of a decision in her hand. The ride home was a tomb of frigid silence. The warmth and possibility of her conversation with Donovan Kincaid evaporated the moment Gregory had stormed out to the valet, his face a thunderous mask. He hadn't spoken a word since he'd found her on the terrace alone and hissed, "Where have you been, Brenda Left? You embarrassed me!" Now, in the sterile luxury of the Maybach, he finally exploded. "What the hell was that whole tonight?" he seethed, not even looking at her. "You wander off. You interrupt me when I'm talking to the most important journalist in the industry to talk about your stupid little hobby. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? It makes me look like I'm married to a simpleton." Natalie stared at her own reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger in a borrowed gown. The anger that had sparked on the terrace was now a slow burning fire in her chest. "She asked what I did," Natalie said, her voice dangerously calm. "I was contributing to the conversation." "Contributing?" Gregory scoffed, finally turning to glare at her. "You contributed nothing. You made us a laughing stock. Biophilic design. It sounds like something a community college would teach. Your job tonight was simple: stand there, look pretty, and back my play. That's it. It's not that hard." "My job," she repeated the words, tasting like poison. "That's what you think this is, our job. It's your role. It's the deal," he snapped. "I provide this life." He gestured around the opulent car, the house, the clothes, the status, and you play the part of the supportive wife. That's the deal we have, and tonight you broke it. The word deal hung in the air between them, ugly and transactional. All the pretense of love, of partnership, of a shared life was stripped away in that one brutal word. He saw their marriage as a business arrangement, and she was a failing asset. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. The years of quiet dismissals, the belittling comments disguised as jokes, the slow, methodical erosion of her confidence and identity. It wasn't just casual arrogance. It was a strategy. He needed her to be small so he could feel big. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply turned back to the window and remained silent for the rest of the ride. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. When they arrived at their sterile, minimalist mansion on the Gold Coast, she walked straight past him up the floating glass staircase to her dressing room. Gregory followed, still fuming. "Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you," he demanded. Natalie began to take off her jewelry. The heavy diamond earrings, the sapphire necklace he'd given her for their anniversary, and placed each piece on the vanity with a deliberate final click. "I have nothing more to say to you, Gregory." "Oh, we have plenty to talk about, starting with your attitude." She turned to face him, her eyes clear and unwavering. "No, we don't. You said it yourself. This is a deal, a transaction, and I'm here to inform you that I'm terminating the contract." Gregory stared at her, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm leaving you, Greg." He laughed, a short, sharp, incredulous bark. "You're what? Leaving me? Don't be ridiculous." "Where would you go? What would you do?" "Go back to planting petunias for old ladies in Winnetka. You have nothing without me. Everything you are is because of me." That was his fatal mistake. He thought he had erased her so completely that she believed it herself. But tonight, a stranger on a balcony had seen her more clearly in 10 minutes than her own husband had in 5 years. "You're wrong," she said, her voice soft but unbreakable. "Everything I am, I've been burying for you, and I'm done." She walked into their shared walk-in closet, a room the size of a small apartment, and pulled out a single dusty suitcase from the very back. She ignored the racks of designer clothes he'd bought her and went to a small section where her old things were stored. Jeans, a few sweaters, practical shoes, the uniform of her former life. The uniform of the real Natalie Finch. Gregory watched his expression shifting from disbelief to fury. "You can't be serious. You walk out that door, Natalie, and you are cut off. The accounts, the cards, the car, everything. I will leave you with nothing." She paused, her hand on the suitcase handle. She thought of the heavy metal card tucked safely in her clutch. It wasn't just a lifeline. It was a weapon. "You already left me with nothing, Greg," she said, looking him dead in the eye. "The only difference is now I'm free of you." She zipped the suitcase and walked out of the room, out of the house, and into the rainy Chicago night without looking back once. She didn't call a friend or a family member. She called a taxi and gave the driver the address of a modest extended-stay hotel in a neighborhood far from the opulent prison she had just escaped. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, she took Donovan Kincaid's card from her purse. She ran her thumb over the embossed letters. The humiliation, the anger, the fear, it all began to coalesce into a single, powerful emotion: resolve. Gregory had been right about one thing. She had a job to do. But it wasn't his. It was her own. The first week was a brutal lesson in humility. The extended-stay hotel was clean, but soulless, a world away from the thread count and room service she'd grown accustomed to. The joint bank accounts were frozen within hours, just as Gregory had promised. The credit cards were declined. The life she had known was severed with the cold digital efficiency of a guillotine. She had a small personal savings account from before her marriage, a few $1,000s she had guarded fiercely. It was now her entire net worth. She used it to buy a refurbished laptop, a burner phone, and to pay for the hotel room. Every purchase was a calculated decision. The profligacy of her old life felt like a dream. Her days were spent in the local library, a place of quiet focus that felt both nostalgic and safe. She didn't mourn her old life. She didn't have time. She was a woman on a mission, fueled by coffee sheer nerve and the memory of Gregory's condescending laugh. She immersed herself in her work. The Viridian Project, once a distant academic dream, became her singular obsession. She worked 12, 15, 18 hours a day. She pulled up old municipal zoning maps, researched environmental impact statements, studied traffic flow patterns, and created complex cost-benefit analyses. The parts of her brain that had lain fallow for 5 years roared back to life. The technical jargon, the design principles, the intricate dance of ecology and commerce, it all came flooding back. She was no longer a gardener. She was an architect, an engineer, a visionary. She also called her old friend from Cornell, Jessica Morales, now a sharp-as-a-tack divorce attorney. "Nat, oh my God, where have you been?" Jessica's voice was a welcome shock of warmth and sanity. Natalie told her everything. The Gala, Gregory's words, the escape in the middle of the night. "I'm filing the papers tomorrow," Jessica said, her tone shifting from concerned friend to formidable lawyer. "He's going to fight you, Nat. He's going to try and paint you as a gold digger who's leaving because the ride got boring. He'll claim you contributed nothing to the marriage." "He's not entirely wrong," Natalie admitted, a bitter taste in her mouth. "I let him sideline me. I have no income, no recent work to show." "Stop," Jessica commanded. "You supported his career. You managed his home. You ran his social life. That is a contribution. But you need more. You need a plan. What's your next move?" "I have a plan," Natalie said, looking at the complex diagrams spread across her small hotel desk. "I'm working on a pitch." After 2 weeks of relentless work, the proposal was ready. It was a 100-page document, complete with architectural renderings she'd created on a free trial of design software, detailed budget projections, and a multi-phase implementation timeline. It was the best work of her life. Her hands trembled as she typed out the email. She addressed it to the email on Donovan Kincaid's card, attaching the prospectus. She kept the message brief and professional, referencing their conversation at the gala, and respectfully requesting a few moments of Mr. Peterson's time to review her submission. She hit send and felt a wave of nausea and adrenaline. It was a Hail Mary pass, a desperate shot in the dark. Kincaid was a billionaire. He probably had 1,000 more promising proposals sitting on his desk. Why would he remember her? Why would he care? Days turned into a week. Her savings were dwindling. The hotel bill was looming. Doubt began to creep in a cold, insidious fog. Gregory's voice echoed in her head. "Where would you go? What would you do? You have nothing without me." She was sitting in a small coffee shop, nursing a single cup for hours to use their Wi-Fi when her burner phone buzzed. It was an unknown number with a downtown area code. She almost ignored it, assuming it was a spam call. But something made her answer. "Hello, is this Ms. Natalie Finch?" The voice was formal, older, and deeply professional. "Yes, this is she. My name is Robert Peterson. I am the head of urban development for Kincaid Holdings. Mr. Kincaid passed along your prospectus for the Viridian Project. He has asked me to review it." Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Peterson." "It's an impressive piece of work, Ms. Finch." Peterson continued, his voice betraying no emotion. "Ambitious, well-researched. I have a few questions about your hydrology and soil remediation projections. Mr. Kincaid would also like to be present for the discussion. Are you available to meet at our offices tomorrow morning at 10? Natalie felt the world shift on its axis. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice steady, despite the tremor running through her body. 10 o'clock is perfect." She hung up the phone and stared out the coffee shop window, a slow, brilliant smile spreading across her face. It was real. The lifeline was real. and she was about to pull herself out of the water. The headquarters of Kincaid Holdings occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek black skyscraper on Wacker Drive. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, exuding an aura of quiet, unshakable power. It was a world designed to intimidate. As Natalie stepped out of the elevator on the 85th floor, she felt a flicker of the old insecurity. She was wearing her only professional outfit, a simple black suit she'd bought at a consignment shop for $90. It felt inadequate for the surroundings. Then she took a deep breath. She wasn't Mrs. Gregory Finch anymore. She was Natalie Finch, the architect of the Viridian Project. Her clothes didn't matter. Her ideas did. A severe but polite assistant led her into a vast corner office with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. Donovan Kincaid stood by the window, not in a suit but in tailored trousers and a cashmere sweater, looking more like a university professor than a corporate titan. Robert Peterson, a man in his late 60s with a hawkish gaze, sat at one end of a massive mahogany table. "Natalie, thank you for coming," Donovan said, his tone warm and welcoming. He gestured to the table. "Please, Mr. Peterson and I have been eagerly anticipating this." For the next 2 hours they grilled her. It wasn't a presentation. It was an interrogation. Peterson was relentless, his questions precise and technical. He challenged her on everything from her choice of native grasses for soil stabilization to her projected return on investment for the commercial zones. He poked holes in her budget, questioned her construction timeline, and demanded she defend every single assertion in her 100-page document. But Natalie was ready. This project had been her entire world for weeks. She knew every number, every plant species, every zoning regulation by heart. She met every challenge with calm, well-reasoned answers. She didn't just defend her ideas. She expanded on them, revealing layers of planning and foresight that weren't even in the written proposal. Donovan remained mostly silent, observing his steepled fingers resting on his chin. He watched the interplay, a quiet intensity in his eyes. He wasn't just evaluating the project. He was evaluating her. Finally, Peterson sat back, a flicker of something that looked like respect in his sharp eyes. He looked at Donovan and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Donovan leaned forward. "Natalie, your proposal is one of the most compelling urban renewal plans I have ever seen. It's thoughtful, sustainable, and financially viable. You've anticipated problems my own teams would have spent months identifying." Natalie felt a surge of pride so intense it almost made her dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid." "Donovan, please," he corrected gently. "Now we have 2 ways we can proceed. Kincaid Holdings can acquire the project from you. We would pay you a generous finder's fee and a consulting contract for the initial phase. It would be a significant, life-changing sum of money. You would be financially secure for the rest of your life." Natalie's mind raced. Financial security. An escape from the dingy hotel, from the constant worry. It was everything she needed. It was the safe choice. Or, Donovan continued, his gaze locking onto hers, there is a second option. It is far riskier for you, but the potential is exponentially greater. He paused. We can form a partnership. Kincaid Holdings will provide the full capital backing the legal framework and the political leverage. You will be the lead architect and project director. We will create a new subsidiary, Viridian Developments, and you will be given a 20% equity stake in the entire venture. Natalie stared at him, speechless. An equity stake. Not a salary. Not a fee. Ownership. He wasn't offering her a job. He was offering her a seat at the table. Her table. That's an incredible offer," she stammered. "It is," Donovan affirmed. "Option 1 gives you a fish. Option 2 teaches you how to build and run a global fishing fleet. The choice depends on what you truly want. Do you want to be paid for your idea, or do you want to be the one to build it?" She thought of Gregory telling her she had nothing, that she was nothing without him. She thought of the condescending smirks at the gala. Option 1 was an escape. Option 2 was a coronation. She looked Donovan Kincaid directly in the eye, her voice ringing with a newfound strength she barely recognized as her own. "I want to build it." A slow, genuine smile spread across Donovan's face. He extended his hand across the mahogany table. "Then welcome to the team, Ms. Finch. I believe we have a city to change." Natalie shook his hand. The deal was done. The new one, her deal. And it wasn't a transaction. It was a beginning. The announcement hit the financial world like a thunderclap. It wasn't a quiet press release. It was a feature story in the Wall Street Journal. Reclusive billionaire Donovan Kincaid partners with architect Natalie Finch to launch $500 million urban renewal initiative. The article featured a sleek professional headshot of Natalie, her name, in bold print. It detailed the scope of the Viridian project, hailing it as a revolutionary model for sustainable development. Her name, Natalie Finch, was suddenly on the lips of every major player in Chicago business and real estate. Gregory Finch found out when his phone started buzzing incessantly during a board meeting. He ignored the first few calls, but then his CFO slid a tablet across the table with the Wall Street Journal article displayed on the screen. He stared at the face of his estranged wife, her expression confident and serene, next to a photo of the one man in the city he could only dream of getting a meeting with. Natalie Finch. Not Mrs. Gregory Finch, just Natalie Finch. The name was followed by her new title, co-founder and chief architect, Viridian Developments. The blood drained from his face. A $500 million project. A partnership with Donovan Kincaid. It was impossible. This was his wife, the gardener, the woman he had told was nothing without him. He felt a wave of dizzying cognitive dissonance, followed by a surge of pure white-hot fury. She hadn't just left him. She had humiliated him on a scale he couldn't have imagined. The story wasn't just about her rise. The unspoken subtext was about the brilliant woman who had been languishing under his shadow. He had been so obsessed with his own image that he had never bothered to look at the asset he had living in his own home. The fallout was immediate. At the country club, the whispers followed him. Men who had once clapped him on the back now gave him looks of pity mixed with contempt. Can you believe it? His wife, with Kincaid. The implication was clear. Gregory Finch wasn't just a bad husband. He was a bad businessman. He'd had a diamond in his house and had been completely oblivious to its value. His professional life began to unravel with alarming speed. The scandal was a catalyst for underlying problems at DataSphere. His arrogance had made him sloppy. A major client, spooked by the negative press, and a recent poorly handled data breach pulled their account, costing the company tens of millions in annual revenue. His board, once compliant, was now openly questioning his leadership. Brenda Lowe, the TechCrunch journalist he had tried so hard to impress, wrote a scathing article not about his genius, but about the toxic tech bro culture at DataSphere, using anonymous sources to paint a picture of a CEO more interested in galas than in governance. Desperate, Gregory tried to claw his way back. His first move was to try and sabotage Natalie. He had his lawyers file motions claiming that the Viridian project was an idea conceived during their marriage, and therefore he was entitled to a share of it, as marital property. Jessica Morales laughed when she saw the filing. "He's desperate, Nat. This won't hold up for a second. Your project was an academic concept you developed long before you even met him. Let me handle this." Jessica eviscerated his legal team in court, producing Natalie's original thesis papers from Cornell dated a decade earlier. The judge threw out Gregory's claim, and the press reported it as another petty failed attempt by a spurned husband to profit from his ex-wife's success. The move backfired spectacularly, painting him as even more pathetic and vindictive. His next tactic was a complete reversal. He tried to reconcile. He showed up at the temporary offices Viridian Developments had leased. Natalie was in the middle of a meeting with a team of engineers when her assistant announced that Mr. Finch was here to see her. She agreed to see him, but not alone. She met him in the glass-walled conference room with Jessica by her side. He looked haggard. The bespoke suits now seemed to hang off him. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading energy. "Nat, listen," he began. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. What I said that night, I didn't mean any of it." Natalie just looked at him, her expression unreadable. "This is incredible," he continued, gesturing around the office. "What you've done with Kincaid. I always knew you had it in you. I was trying to protect you from the stress of this world. I see now that was wrong. I want to be a part of this. I want to support you. We can be a team again. A real power couple." It was so transparent, it was almost laughable. He didn't want her. He wanted an introduction to Donovan Kincaid. He wanted to leech off her newfound success. Natalie let the silence hang in the air for a long moment before she spoke, her voice calm and devoid of the old fear. "No, Greg. You didn't make a mistake. You revealed who you are. You don't see me. You see an opportunity, just like you did 5 years ago. The only thing that's changed is my market value." She stood up. "The divorce proceedings will continue. My lawyer will be in touch with yours regarding the division of our actual marital assets. But we," she said, gesturing between the two of them, "are finished. Please don't come to my place of business again." She turned and walked out of the conference room without a backward glance, leaving Gregory standing there utterly defeated. His empire was crumbling. His reputation was in tatters, and the woman he had thrown away was now building a new skyline without him. A year and a half later, a crowd of hundreds gathered on a crisp autumn day on the south side of Chicago. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Journalists, city officials, investors, and community leaders were all present. Behind a large stage, massive earth-moving equipment stood silent, ready to break ground on what was now the most talked-about development in the country, the Viridian project. The derelict industrial wasteland had been cleared. The polluted canal was sectioned off, ready for its transformation. Today marked the official commencement of construction. Natalie Finch stood at the side of the stage, not in a borrowed designer gown, but in a sharply tailored pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a professional knot. She was looking over her speech, but her eyes kept drifting to the plans displayed on a large easel, the curving lines of the bioswales, the placement of the community amphitheater, the intricate network of pedestrian bridges and gardens. Her dream, rendered in concrete and steel, was about to become a reality. Donovan Kincaid stood with her not as a handler, but as a proud partner. Their relationship over the past year and a half had been one of intense collaborative work. They had spent countless hours in boardrooms and on construction sites. He had become her mentor, her champion, and her friend. There was a deep, unspoken respect between them, a bond forged in shared ambition and mutual admiration. He had never once treated her as anything other than an equal. "Nervous?" he asked, his voice a low rumble beside her. "No," Natalie replied, a genuine smile touching her lips. "I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it." When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the podium with a confidence that was now second nature. She looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the expectant faces, and she felt a profound sense of peace. "When I first imagined this project years ago, as a student," she began, her voice clear and strong, carrying over the assembled crowd, "it was an exercise in hope. The hope that we could do more than just build buildings, the hope that we could build communities, that we could take a place that industry had forgotten and turn it into a space where nature and humanity could thrive together." She spoke not of balance sheets or profit margins, but of a vision for a better city. She spoke of clean water, of public art, of safe places for children to play. She spoke with the authority of someone who had fought for her vision and won. The applause when she finished was thunderous and sustained. As she stepped down from the podium, Donovan was the first to greet her. "You didn't just design a project, Natalie," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You've inspired a movement." From the back of the crowd, partially hidden behind a large oak tree, a man watched the scene. He was thinner, his expensive suit looking a size too big. His face was a mixture of awe, regret, and bitter envy. It was Gregory. Datasphere had been acquired by a larger competitor for a fraction of its former value, and he had been forced out of the company he founded. He was a wealthy man, but a forgotten one. He was no longer an innovator. He was a footnote in someone else's story. He watched as the mayor shook Natalie's hand, as investors swarmed her with congratulations, as Donovan Kincaid stood by her side, a silent, powerful guardian. He had been so focused on being the man at the gala, he had never realized the real innovator was standing right next to him all along. He turned and walked away a ghost at the feast of his own making. Natalie didn't see him go. She was too busy surrounded by people who saw her, who valued her, who were there to celebrate her creation. Her success wasn't about the money or the fame. It wasn't about getting the billionaire or getting revenge on the millionaire. It was about the moment she walked away from a life that made her small and found the courage to build one that was big enough for her dreams. She had finally designed her own landscape, and it was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. 2 years passed. The sounds of heavy machinery on the south side were replaced by the rustle of leaves in the wind and the laughter of children. The Viridian project was no longer a blueprint or a construction site. It was a living, breathing part of Chicago. The canal, once a murky brown, now ran clear, flanked by lush rain gardens that filtered the city's runoff. Pedestrians strolled along winding paths of permeable pavers, and office workers ate lunch under the shade of newly planted river birch trees. What was once a scar on the city's landscape had become its vibrant green heart. Natalie Finch was no longer the promising architect from the news articles. She was a celebrated visionary, the recipient of the coveted gold medal from the American Institute of Architects. Tonight, she was accepting that award at a ceremony held in a pavilion within her own creation, the Viridian project itself. She stood at the podium, bathed in the warm glow of the stage lights. She wore a simple, elegant gown of her own, choosing its deep green color, mirroring the landscape outside. She was poised, her voice resonating with a quiet authority that captivated the audience of industry legends. "A blueprint," she said, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, "is a promise. It's a drawing of a future that doesn't exist yet. But it is just a piece of paper. The real work is in the building. Not just the building of structures, but the building of trust of teams and of a belief in a shared vision. She paused her gaze, finding Donovan Kincaid in the front row. He was watching her, his expression one of immense, quiet pride. I was fortunate to find a partner who didn't just see the lines on the paper, but who saw the promise behind them, who didn't offer a handout, but a handshake. Thank you, Donovan, for helping me build the promise. Miles away in a dimly lit, overpriced bar on Rush Street, Gregory Finch swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He was on a date with a woman half his age, an aspiring influencer who was more interested in taking selfies of her cocktail than in his rambling stories about the glory days of Datasphere. And at its peak, we were processing terabytes of data a second. I was on the cover of Wired, he said, puffing out his chest. The woman nodded vaguely, tapping at her phone. That's wild, she muttered. On the large television screen above the bar, a local news channel was covering the Architecture Awards. Natalie's face filled the screen. She was radiant, smiling, holding the prestigious gold medal. The chyron read, Natalie Finch, the architect who remade Chicago's South Side. Gregory fell silent. He stared at the screen at the woman he once called his gardener. He saw in her a strength and a light that he had never recognized or perhaps had chosen to extinguish because it threatened to outshine his own. He saw the world celebrating her not for the man she was married to, but for the world she had built. The woman beside him, oblivious, finally looked up from her phone. Hey, isn't that your ex-wife? She asked, a note of bored curiosity in her voice. Gregory didn't answer. He just took a long, slow drink, the whiskey burning a path down his throat. He had his money. He had the freedom he thought he wanted. But watching Natalie on that screen, he understood the profound nature of his loss. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost a future he was too blind to see. Later that evening, long after the guests had departed, Natalie walked along the moonlit paths of the Viridian project. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Donovan approaching. I thought I might find you here, he said, his voice soft in the quiet of the night. Checking on your kingdom. It's not a kingdom, she smiled. It's a community, and I just wanted to see it at peace. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The park they had built together, a silent testament to their partnership. What you said tonight, Donovan began. About the handshake. That's what I saw in you that night at the gala. Not a victim. I saw a partner waiting for an opportunity. You saw something I had almost forgotten I was, Natalie admitted. He stopped by the edge of the now pristine canal, the lights of the city reflecting in the water. My late wife, Alice. He said the first time he had mentioned her name in months was an artist, a sculptor. She always said that the most beautiful forms weren't carved out of stone, but were the ones that were already there, waiting to be freed. You just had to be willing to chip away the excess. He turned to Natalie, his grey eyes soft in the moonlight. You did all the work, Natalie. You freed yourself. I just handed you a chisel. In that moment, their shared journey felt like it was culminating into something new. The project was finished. The long hours and late-night meetings were over. A new space had opened up before them. Slowly, naturally, Donovan reached out and took her hand. It wasn't the proprietary grip Gregory used to favor branding her as his. It was a gentle, supportive clasp, an intertwining of fingers. It wasn't a claim. It was a question, an invitation. Natalie curled her fingers around his. It felt right. It felt like the start of a new blueprint, one they would design together. Not as a billionaire and his protégé, but as two equals, standing in the heart of the beautiful world they had promised and then built. Natalie's journey from an invisible wife to a visionary leader is a powerful reminder that our worth is never defined by how others see us, but by how we choose to see ourselves. She didn't wait for permission to be brilliant. She took a moment of public humiliation and forged it into the fuel for her own resurrection. She proves that the most valuable investments we can ever make are in our own talents and our own self-respect. Gregory Finch lost everything because he saw his wife as a reflection of himself, while Donovan Kincaid gained a powerful partner because he saw her for who she truly was. What did you think of Natalie's transformation? Could you feel the chill in that car ride home after the gala? Let us know in the comments below what part of her story resonated with you the most. Have you ever had to start over or fight to have your voice heard? We love hearing your stories. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.